The sand dunes of ancient Mesopotamia have witnessed some of the most profound military triumphs and devastating disasters in the long history of human warfare. But no conflict in the ancient world matches the sheer tactical catastrophe that unfolded in the blistering heat of 53 BC near the town of Carrhae. This was the historic moment when the ultimate military superpower of the Mediterranean confronted a highly unconventional enemy they completely failed to understand. At the center of this monumental historical tragedy stood Marcus Licinius Crassus, who was widely recognized as the wealthiest man in the entire Roman Republic. Crassus had achieved immense political power and unmatched financial fortunes through cutthroat real estate schemes and silver mines, but he desperately craved military glory. He watched with intense jealousy as his political rivals Julius Caesar and Pompey the Great won massive victories and captured vast new territories for Rome. To cement his own legacy and secure an equal footing in the Roman hierarchy, Crassus financed a massive independent army out of his own deep pockets. His ambitious plan was to march deep into the east, conquer the wealthy Parthian Empire, and extend the boundaries of Rome all the way to India. Like and subscribe to Visual Link if you want to explore the ultimate military strategies and tragic blunders that shaped the ancient world. Crassus assembled 7 elite Roman legions totaling over 40,000 heavily armored infantrymen who were highly trained for brutal close-quarters combat. The Roman legion was a formidable war machine that had smashed every traditional army in its path using rigid discipline-heavy shields and short swords. As this massive iron column marched through the deserts of modern-day Turkey, Crassus felt completely invincible, believing that sheer numbers would terrify his eastern opponents. But the Parthian Empire was not a conventional state with standard infantry blocks that could be easily surrounded and crushed by Roman tactical formations. The Parthian General Surena was a brilliant young military strategist who possessed an intimate understanding of the desert landscape and the limitations of heavy armor. Surena gathered a highly specialized cavalry force of only 10,000 men consisting of 9,000 horse archers and 1,000 heavily armored cataphracts. Crassus was confidently led into the deep, open desert plains by a treacherous local guide who intentionally placed the Romans in an exposed position. When the two armies finally caught sight of each other, the Roman commanders urged Crassus to camp near a river and gather vital military intelligence. But Crassus was filled with immense arrogance and ordered his exhausted soldiers to advance immediately into the blinding sun without resting or hydrating. To counter the potential threat of being outflanked by the fast-moving enemy cavalry, Crassus ordered his legions to form a massive, rigid defensive square. Each side of this colossal human square was 12 cohorts long, protected by a solid wall of overlapping rectangular shields known as the scutum. This defensive formation was incredibly strong against direct frontal assaults, but it completely stripped the Roman army of its operational mobility and tactical flexibility. Surena deployed his 1,000 elite cataphracts who were covered from head to toe in gleaming bronze and iron scale armor to look intimidating. He initially ordered his heavy cavalry to cover their armor with animal skins to hide their numbers and lure the Romans into a false sense of security. Suddenly, the Parthians dropped the cloaks and advanced to the sound of roaring kettle drums that echoed across the desert like rolling thunder. If you are enjoying this deep dive into the deadliest tactical mistakes of ancient history, hit that like button for Visual Link. Instead of charging directly into the solid Roman wall as Crassus expected, the Parthian horse archers suddenly wheeled around the giant square. They began unleashing a nonstop torrent of heavy composite arrows that rained down upon the tightly packed Roman soldiers from every direction. The Parthian bow was a masterpiece of ancient engineering made from hornwood and sinew that generated immense kinetic energy and piercing power. These arrows easily punched right through the wooden Roman shields and pinned the hands and feet of the legionnaires directly to their heavy armor. Crassus ordered his light infantry skirmishers to charge out and drive the archers back, but they were instantly overwhelmed by a barrage of arrows. The Roman soldiers were forced to retreat back into the suffocating dust of the defensive square while the relentless rain of metal continued unabated. Crassus remained calm at first because he believed that the horse archers would eventually run out of ammunition and be forced into close-quarters combat. But General Surena had anticipated this exact scenario and engineered one of the greatest military logistical innovations in the history of global warfare. He had positioned a massive supply train of 1,000 heavily loaded baggage camels just over the horizon, acting as a mobile ammunition depot. Whenever a Parthian horse archer emptied his quiver, he simply galloped back to the camel caravan loaded up with fresh arrows and returned to the fight. This meant that the Parthians could maintain a completely continuous, devastating firing line without ever needing to pause or retreat from the battlefield. Don't forget to subscribe to Visual Link and turn on notifications so you never miss our weekly breakdowns of historical turning points. Realizing that his main army was being slowly executed where they stood, Crassus ordered his young son Publius to launch a desperate counterattack. Publius gathered 1,300 elite Gallic cavalry and 8 cohorts of infantry to charge out and break the deadly circle of Parthian archers. The Parthians feigned a chaotic retreat, drawing the eager young Publius and his men far away from the protective shield wall of the main Roman square. Once the Roman strike force was completely isolated, the Parthian horse archers turned around while the heavily armored cataphracts smashed into their flanks. The Gallic cavalry fought with immense bravery, but their light horses were easily trampled by the massive armored warhorses of the Parthian cataphracts. Publius and his entire force were completely wiped out in the desert sands, and the Parthians cut off his head to use as a psychological weapon. They rode back to the main Roman square and paraded the severed head of Crassus's son on a long spear in front of the horrified legions. This brutal psychological blow completely shattered the remaining morale of the exhausted, terrified, and deeply dehydrated Roman soldiers inside the collapsing square. When night finally fell, the Parthians withdrew into the desert because ancient armies rarely engaged in active combat operations under the cover of darkness. Crassus was completely paralyzed by profound grief and total psychological collapse, leaving his remaining officers to organize a chaotic nighttime retreat. They abandoned over 4,000 wounded Roman soldiers in the camp, who were mercilessly executed by the advancing Parthians the very next morning. The remnants of the Roman army fled to the nearby walled town of Carrhae, but they were quickly surrounded and cut off from all water lines. In a final act of desperation, Crassus was lured into a fake peace negotiation by General Surena under the pretense of a diplomatic truce. A violent scuffle broke out during the meeting, and Crassus was killed on the spot, ending his ambitious dreams of Eastern conquest forever. According to legendary historical accounts, the Parthians poured molten gold down the throat of Crassus's corpse as a symbol of his boundless greed. Of the 40,000 Roman soldiers who crossed the Euphrates River, over 20,000 were killed and 10,000 were captured into permanent slavery. The Battle of Carrhae stands as a stark, timeless warning of what happens when a military leader relies entirely on arrogance and numbers. Crassus assumed his conventional tactics would work against a dynamic, asymmetric enemy that leveraged the environment and superior logistics to their advantage. The shifting sands of Carrhae prove that raw wealth and heavy armor are completely useless without tactical adaptation and operational intelligence. We must always remember that the most dangerous weapon on any battlefield is not a sharper sword, but a mind that refuses to learn. True strategic mastery requires us to study our opponents, respect their unique capabilities, and build systems that can adapt to changing realities. The tragedy of the lost legions is a quiet, eternal reminder that history unmercifully punishes those who confuse arrogance with actual strength. Turn your focus toward the objective data, analyze your environment carefully, and never let your ego dictate your operational plan of action. The battlefield of tomorrow belongs to the flexible minds who look past tradition and master the deep mathematics of logistics and strategy. Learn from the fatal mistakes of the past, protect your flanks, understand your network, and always find your path through the storm. The modern world is filled with invisible tactical traps designed to pick apart rigid, outdated organizations that refuse to evolve their internal systems. Keep your strategies dynamic, keep your systems agile, and ensure your knowledge matches the shifting terrain of your specific industry challenge. The ultimate test of any creator or leader is the ability to maintain clarity and perspective when the arrows begin to fall. Stay curious, stay resilient, and keep navigating your way through the complex grids of strategy, so hit that like and subscribe button for visual link.